show. I'm very thrilled to be joined by Green Beret Nap Time. He's a former Green Beret. He is an 18 series Army veteran. I'll have him explain that. And he's spent his career hunting down terrorists and now defends Western values through history and common sense. And through his X account, he debunks anti-Semitic propaganda. He dismantles jihadi narratives. He exposes misleading history with very sharp insights, which I think is gleaned from his time in, I believe you were in Afghanistan and beyond. And he's a self-described politically homeless conservative. He's all about patriotism, liberty, and the special forces ethos of de oppresso liber, to liberate the oppressed. So we want to dive into his experiences, the origins of the Green Berets, combating information warfare, the threat of Islam, and more. So let us begin. And thank you. You said we can call you Hank. Thank you very much for coming on.
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah. You said you're a former 18 series Army veteran. I had to look that up to see what that actually was. But can you give us just a quick overview of your journey into the Green Berets? What drew you to the Special Forces? And hello to all the guests. Welcome.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you. Thanks for having me on. So the 18, every job, it's called an MOS, a military occupational specialty, within the Army has a number identifier. So whether it be a truck driver or an infantryman or whatever it is, and Special Forces is 18. So when I say 18 series, that's kind of what that means.
Okay.
So I wanted to join out of high school. My parents talked me into going to college to learn a little bit about life first, and then they were pretty, they were wanted me to do what was like best. So I ended up going to college then, decided a few years in that I did want to end up joining. So joined up and got what's called an X-ray contract. And from there, just you go. Basically, what that does is that gives you an avenue into Special Forces as long as you can pass everything. So it's kind of just like you get a tryout type of thing. And so did that, went through, passed all the training, got through, did almost 14 years and then got out. I deployed to Tajikistan, Afghanistan, Iraq, Africa, and then some other little trips here and there that were they were missions, but they were not necessarily, they weren't combat and they weren't necessarily training either at the same time. So did some different things. So learned a lot, had a lot of fun, met a lot of amazing people, and that's the nutshell of what all began it.
Well, very cool. I mean, from my perspective, Green Berets are something special. Special forces. I watched the movie with who's the actor? Oh my God, now the name, just John Wayne. I watched it when I was a kid. It was quite a powerful, very sad movie. But I think for all of us, we have a lot of respect for people who do what you do. And also we've got Philip. He says Semper Fidelis from an O2XX series. He's ex-Army and I believe Army Intel. And then we have Sergeant Grinch as well. He is, I believe, a former Marine. Says he was in Q course in 2004, had a freak accident that fractured his spine. Sorry, Sergeant. Yeah, applaud all that lived the dream. So yeah. But he's got some great stories to tell as well about his time on board various ships and things.
The Q course isn't one of those things that there's great dudes that are going through it at all times that don't end up making it for one reason or another. So a lot of it's injury. There's a lot of different things that can happen. It's a long course. It's a minimum. It's a year long. So, life happens. A lot of life happens in a year, and then for medics, it's another year on top of that. So a little over 2 years, really, once it's all said and done. So there's a lot that can happen in that time frame, personally, professionally, everything. So yeah.
Okay, yeah, understood. Your handle, Green Beret Nap Time. How do you come onto that? Because it's actually quite intriguing.
It's an inside joke. So Green Berets just have a thing where whatever was going on, because sometimes we're working through the weekends or we're working randomly. So maybe you either stayed out too late the night before, or maybe you were doing something and you didn't get as much sleep as you thought. So the next day, you need to get a GBNT in, which is it's Green Beret nap time. So it's just a little, it's just a little inside joke that, the community kind of uses as like a dang, I'm tired, I need to go take a break for a minute.
Cool. Also, you start every morning with Morning Patriots, which is quite inspirational. You post a really cool photo each time, something that I think people really rally around. And you said recently, like, United States is the best country, and it's not even close. I mean, you're very passionate about your country. You're very passionate about just, I think, your mission. I mean, what is your current mission, and what drives that for you?
I mean, the mission is just to bridge the gap between civilians and the military, So I happen to have been SF, so that's what I kind of focus on. But I'm all about anybody who is gonna raise up and say, even like I said, whether you're close politically or whether you're different politically, I think at the end of the day, most of us can all agree that we're all still Americans, and we all have those same values that that drive us and make us Americans and want to preserve that. So that's really just it. I mean, there is active forces that are trying to, vilify the good, and trying to overwhelm what is a beacon of peace and just betterment of the world, which is the United States. And then,
you remind me of a story. When I lived in the Middle East, I was doing a course actually on databases, oddly enough, Oracle. And I was, at the time, I was a little bit of a normie. And I didn't know much about Islam, and I didn't know much about Hamas and, all of these, and the issue, the goings on with Israel. And I was obviously very sympathetic to the Muslims that I was listening to and talking to. I was trying to just be a good burger in the UAE, and they were always talking about how America is the big bad guy in the world. And there was an American who came to teach us, lovely guy. I got along really well with him, and he was talking about America as the big white, what's the quote about shining on the hill, the big white,
the shining armor,
shining hill on the house on the hill. And as an inspiration. And he was very patriotic without being aggressive. And I was really touched by what he said. But then I started to buy into the whole anti-America thing. And a lot of that, I think, comes from the whole idea of, question everything. I mean, that actually that's a snake in the grass, because then you start to question things that are important. You start to question what makes a man. Is a man a woman? It takes you down to an absurd ending when some things really should not be questioned. They should be accepted and defended. And I nearly went down that road, and I caught myself, and I came back very angry. And I on this channel, I try to also, like you do, debunk things, go into detailed research. And there's definitely a force trying to undermine what is good. I don't know if that story sort of if you can relate to that.
Mm-hmm. I mean, every civilization, every country, every demographic of people has bad eggs in it, right? Like, not everybody's perfect. Humanity is just made up of a lot of different people, and to sit here and say, they always highlight the bad of certain countries, the bad of whatever. But there's, like with the United States, for example, there's so much more good. And I mean, it is the most philanthropic country that has ever existed in the world.
True.
Bar none, not even close. There's no, you can't even argue that fact. Yet it still gets vilified because certain, decisions it had to make, or because of certain wars, and whether I agree with those wars or not, right? Like, at the end of the day, I'm pro-American, and I'm gonna stand up for what's right. So if we did something wrong, then I think we should own it, and then strive to be better moving forward. But there are actual countries out there that have, the populations aren't bad. The people mainly aren't bad, but the leadership that's in charge is, and wants to do, terrible things to people, wants to control people. And that's happened, throughout history, and especially in the last 150 years with the rise of socialism and communism and that whole collectivist ideology that is being pushed. And anytime you devalue the individual, for the collective, then it's always going to end up terrible for people. So that's kind of what I try to push against.
No, I applaud you for that. I live in Poland. My family is obviously Polish, um, and Poland has lived through some terrible events. Like, Poland has
Mhm.
been invaded, I think, 16 times by Russia and Germany. So they're one of the
Mhm.
most invaded countries on earth. They were taken off the map for 123 years. They fought to reestablish themselves as a country. They've suffered huge losses. World War II, like 20% of the population died. Terrible. They refused to give up, and they suffered, I mean, terribly. And if America falls, one has to wonder who will replace America against, because if you look at tyrannical oppressive regimes, they are the norm, not the exception. You
Right.
know, liberty, freedom, that is the exception. And I mean, even Europe has too many times toyed with oppression and totalitarianism. If America
Mhm.
falls, who looks after the world? Who protects the world? I mean, Poland is gearing up; it's ramping up its military to be the strongest military in Europe. But that said, without America's help, who stands in that breach, right? I mean, because the forces of, I think, without hopefully being overly dramatic or poetic, but the forces of darkness are rising, and
Mhm.
America is literally the only thing that stands in the way.
Yeah, well, I mean, and it's also the fight is not necessarily on a battlefield anymore. It's making sure people can see narratives and see evil for what it is,
Yeah.
and recognize what that is. And um, because if you think about history, think if we hadn't have won the atom bomb race, think if Germany, fascist Germany at the time had won, what would have happened
Mhm.
then? Or what if Japan at the time had won?
They would have used
Maybe
it.
then maybe their ideology doesn't alter over time, where now they're one of our stronger allies. But had they got the bomb first, what would have happened? So it's kind of one of those things. It's America existing and then American exceptionalism kind of being as exceptional as it was have stopped some really terrible things from happening. Because say we
Mhm.
didn't join World War II, right? Say um, we let Hitler and Stalin duke it out, right? Whoever ends up winning that probably when it's all said and done, Stalin ends up winning that. Maybe if Germany, Germany going into Russia would be what would really have been their downfall, just like every other nation that tried to invade Russia, especially like
Mhm.
because there's only like 2 months out of the year that you can actually go invade Russia, so makes it pretty difficult. And so say that we let them duke it out. Now we're eventually going to be fighting communism again, right? Whether whoever wins that battle, that's fascism or communism, whoever wins, we're gonna end up fighting them at some point, right? It's only going to grow bigger and stronger, and you know the Cold War is essentially what kind of helped us defeat Russia. But now it's happening to us the other
Yeah.
way around. So it's kind of one of those. They realized they couldn't beat us militarily. They couldn't beat us, um, you know, from the outside. So now they're moving in and they're pushing
Mhm.
information warfare inside of the United States to really divide and conquer at that point.
Agreed. I mean, that's very much information warfare. Something I'll touch on a little bit later. I have an interesting story to share there, but yeah. So, I mean, to you, just for you, the United States is the best country. I mean, name one thing that makes you feel genuinely America's the best country. Well, what for you is the best?
I mean, I think people take it for granted. You can wake up tomorrow and decide you want to move completely across the country. There's a method for you to liquidate to get funds, through selling stuff or doing different things. You can go get any job you want that you can try at least. Right there's a lot of countries that don't even have that option.
Mhm.
um, you can build something on your own, and it's happened numerous times. In fact, most millionaires right now are self-made millionaires. They're not
Awesome.
inherited millionaire. Like, so they didn't make that money from their family. They went out and they built something and then they made themselves successful. And
Right.
having it, maybe it's not perfect, but it is the best in the world to where you can go make something out of yourself with nothing. And it happens all the time. You hear Cinderella stories about this all the time, whether sports, business, doesn't matter. You can set your mind to something and you can go do it. And that's just the quintessential thing about, because I mean, you go over to China, guess what they're not doing. They're not in charge of their own destiny, right? They're doing whatever the government, whatever either their parents did before or the government
Mhm.
tells them to do. and I mean, that's the same in a lot of other countries around the world.
Yeah, so give the opportunity and
Right.
allow you to be the best you can be.
Right.
I think that's true. To change tack a little bit, so just for us normies, to talk about SF for a few minutes. Oh, wait, one more question. What do you mean by you are politically homeless as a conservative?
It means that I disagree with kind of both that one, the two-party system. I feel like it pushes us into these two different factions that are actually I kind of use the like, there's the 60% of us in the middle, and then there's the wild 20% on each side, so those are the two where it pushes us into kind of their faction and their world. And sometimes I don't agree with all of that. And I don't see the problem with having the ability to have other candidates that maybe meet the expectations of more voters than just what the GOP and what Democrats have to offer. So I find it hard to identify, especially because I also believe in the Constitution, and I believe in calling out the things that are wrong or the things that were done incorrectly, and so that they can get done correctly. And at the end of the day, when you do that, you get called. If I did that to somebody on the right, then they're going to call me a Democrat. If I did that to someone on the left, they're going to call me a Republican. And so then you just get lumped in for critically thinking about things. And so it's just hard for me to just sit here and say I'm going to label myself this when I disagree with a lot of what is happening, and I mean, both sides are voting for more debt, and both sides are voting to spend more of our money on all kinds of things. So it just makes it hard for it's when I'm looking at it that way, I'm like, well, you know what, if we had another option, maybe we could get somebody in there,
right?
But we're so set into this two-party system that it makes it really hard.
Well, look, I mean, I've already told myself that I will sneak across the southern border in 2028, and I will vote for Trump on his third term. So,
Yeah,
you'll find me in the polling line. Question. I mean, a lot of us think SF is just like the movies. I mean, maybe it is, but what do they really do, and what are you most proud of? In terms
so what's cool about SF and what a lot of people don't know. Well, one, we're the only special forces. So anytime anyone says they were special forces, like if you're talking about American military, I mean, there's other special forces in other countries. But American military, there is U.S. Army Special Forces, which is the Green Berets, or Army SF, however you want to call it. Then there's Special Operations Forces. Those would be Rangers. And again, this isn't saying that anyone's better than anyone else by any means, because every special operations unit has its own intricacies and its own reasoning to exist. So it's by no means saying that one's better than the other, because if you go by the old tier categories, like Delta Force is obviously a little higher tier than SF, but they're not special forces. They're Delta Force, so they have different names, but operators or whatever you want to call them. And then there's other units out there too, but so like Navy SEALs, which would fall under SOF. So everything kind of falls under SOF, which SF also falls under SOF. So it's all kind of, SOF is like the conglomerate term for any kind of special operations unit. But as far as special forces goes, it's just us. And then the mission set for special forces is what's really unique about it. So other, like Rangers are going to be your DA direct action heavy unit, which is essentially, I mean, think of shock troops. They're who you send in when the fight is about to be real and there's going to be a lot of fighting. That's who you send in. You send in Marines, right? Those are all kind of shock troops, shock infantry troops is what you could call it. They and again, not to say anything negative about anybody, but it's just the reality of what they get trained in most and what they do. We get trained in direct action also, but we also have a bunch of other mission sets. We do unconventional warfare, and that's our core our core capability that really no one else has. So that's what kind of sets us apart, is the unconventional warfare aspect of it. And so SF is unique too, that it can go into a theater. It can operate, ODAs can go into a theater, which is Operational Detachment Alpha is a SF team. There's 12 men on them. You could go in as a company, which would be, 5 or 6 teams. And then the company size element to overlook it. A battalion or a group, which would be a division size, all in a theater, and we can manage it all ourselves, all the way through the ranks. We can generate our own intelligence. We can generate follow-on targets and kind of create our own missions, which is pretty unheard of for almost every other unit out there. So that's really the big thing that SF is capable of doing.
Okay, that's interesting. That's an interesting distinction. I wasn't aware of that.
Yeah, so that's just one of it's one of those things you don't really know unless you're in the industry.
Okay.
Yeah.
What are you most proud of? And what was the biggest gain that you had from it in terms of mindset, attitude, beliefs? I'd be very curious to know.
Just your body can do so much more. Your body and your mind can do so much more than you ever think it could. Sometimes but you have to stress it to do that. So the kind of old saying, the weak men make hard times create strong men create weak times type thing. It's real. It's real. I mean, if you don't ever work out and you don't ever push yourself and you don't ever do anything hard, how can you really know how you're going to react in that situation in the event that something like that does happen? So, where we get, one of my biggest thing was just how much farther you can go when you're convinced that you're done. You can't move anymore. I don't know that I can walk anymore. You can't take another step. And then you end up taking, 600 more steps or 1,000 more steps. And you just keep kind of going and going and being up, knowing that you can overcome a whole lot of adversity, especially with the people around you. So,
right.
Yeah.
I mean, on your X page, I'm guessing that a lot of the mindset and the attitudes that you learned, the insights you learned, feeds into what you're doing on social media. It's warfare in a different landscape, right? Information space.
Right.
Do you feel that has fed in there, and this is what you're doing? You're conducting a campaign against falsehoods and propaganda?
Yeah. I mean, we have, it's called when we're in the planning section and you're planning part of a mission, it's called information operations, but it's information warfare. It's and it's been around for hundreds of years now. I mean, it's really been around for thousands of years, just in a mass media kind of projection, and which is, in the last 100 to 150 years or so is where it really kind of took off, because propaganda is a lot easier to push when you can flash emotional messages in front of somebody's face at any point during the day, right? So, but back when there was only radios, there was no TV or anything, it was harder to generate emotional responses. So propaganda wasn't quite as effective. But nowadays, and especially with AI, where it is at and where it's headed, it's going to be even more difficult to differentiate, something real from something completely generated. But that's kind of understanding what that is and how we used it in our theater campaigns, and then seeing it happen kind of in front of everybody's face. That's kind of what I like to push back and say, hey, look, let's look at this critically and think about what we're actually seeing here. So.
Yeah, I'm just displaying your page online for everyone to have a look. And for everyone, his X account is linked in the pinned comment, so you guys can find him there. Do follow him on X, and I'll add a pinned comment as well later where you guys can find him. But yeah, this is your page. I mean, this was a funny joke,
Yeah. Yeah. Sometimes, I'll get sent something funny from a buddy, and I'm like, oh, you know what? That's kind of, that'll make me chuckle. Some people might get mad about it, but hey, it's all in good fun.
What made you start this tradition? I mean, it's kind of cool. It really is cool. The photos are awesome. What made you start this?
I just, I mean, I saw, there's people that say good morning to everybody every day. And I was like, I just want to, add in some cool military stuff that, people may not have seen, or, if it gets them, hey, what is this? Or, just, again, anything that can bridge the gap between
Right.
civilians and SF.
Tell me, do you think that, because look, we're seeing a lot of misinformation out there, right? People are obviously trying to undermine good values, undermine the West. Does it seem like this is based on some kind of coordinated or information warfare type strategy? Because it doesn't seem accidental. It seems deliberate. It seems coordinated or engineered in some way, managed in some fashion.
Well, I mean, and then you have just the sheer amount of money that is everywhere is also making it even bigger and more readily available for groups that weren't able to have very much reach beforehand. I mean, you spend $1 million now, and you can flood the airwaves, or you can flood whatever. You get pushes on social media, all kinds of stuff. So yeah, I mean, I'm not a conspiracy theorist in the sense that I think that there's some conglomerate of, rich, powerful people that are trying to rule the world. I mean, you know what?
There's George Soros. I mean,
I mean, I think there are people that have a view of where they want the world to go. And so they're going to push it that way. But yeah, I mean, there's a huge information warfare campaign to divide the United States from Europe and from Israel. So that kind of they want to break NATO up. They want to break the ties between the U.S. and Israel. And whether you agree with Israel or not, I mean, it doesn't really matter to me.
Yeah.
I'm just calling it like I see it. They right now, they kind of, with the U.S. supporting Israel, there's a lot of Middle Eastern things that are not going to happen. These countries are not going to do certain things while the threat of the United States is looming over all of it. Now, if that was able to be removed at somehow, then there's bad things that would happen to the world, because if the U.S. is no longer there to, stand guard for the return of the Ottoman Empire, or, some of these things that are actively trying to manifest in that area.
Right. When I was in the Middle East, I worked all across the Middle East. I traveled to a lot of fun places and worked out there. But for instance, I was in Qatar, and I was also in Bahrain. But when I was in Qatar, what was interesting was we'd installed a radar system that looked 20 kilometers deep into Saudi from the Qatari border, looking for troop movements, as well as especially military hardware, like troop carriers, tanks, stuff like that, because the Qataris were actually terrified of a Saudi invasion. Because, for instance, in Bahrain, when there was this uprising in Bahrain some years ago, the Saudis went in to calm things down, but they didn't seem to want to leave. And it was basically through military pressure from the US, or diplomatic pressure, that the Saudis were politely asked to finally just exit the country, right? But this was when Iran was inciting rebellions and revolts and things and unhappiness within the region. There was quite a thing going on, because I had a chance to even speak with someone in the ministry about well, anyway, that was my job. But what happened was, in Saudi, it was apparently against international law to be scanning into another country. It's effectively openly spying on them, but they were doing it anyway, because they were terrified that Saudi would invade, because obviously, hey, free, natural gas. But besides that, the Saudis also were very unhappy with what the Qataris were doing, because obviously their collaboration with Iran and their funding of terror and propaganda across the world, right? So there's tensions even within these Islamic countries, vying for power and control. Doesn't make anyone the good guy. It just means that you got a bunch of bad guys fighting over who's in charge.
Right.
So there's a lot
I mean, it's kind of one of those things, like maybe we never should have got involved in the Middle East. You could certainly make that argument. But at the end of the day, you're right. I mean, there's not a whole lot of Middle Eastern countries. There's really only one. And now, Israel is the only one that shares Western democratic values.
Correct.
And I think that's what it all kind of boils down to is Sharia law cannot exist in a country with Western values, because it completely contradicts.
No, it does. And also, the U.S. is actually a stabilizing force in the region, because you'd have a lot more of these little land grabs and incursions if the U.S. weren't there, which is why Bahrain has a U.S. Navy detachment there, which is why Qatar has the Fifth Fleet are there, I think. So so I was involved with this, just designing these surveillance systems to protect a lot of these areas. But the US is actually a major stabilizing force, believe it or not. I mean, there's lots of, sure, you can point at the CIA for doing all sorts of bad things, but the US actually brings a huge amount of stability to the world, financially and militarily. I mean, otherwise you'd have conflicts popping off left and right. I mean, under Biden, I think we saw a lot of things going bad, and under Trump, you see a lot of stability coming back.
Yep.
So there is that people do miss.
Yeah, I did an entire little thread on what would happen if the U.S. government ended up falling for the world, what it would mean for the world.
Right.
And kind of just did a walkthrough of like literally if the U.S. government fell within 36 hours, a lot of wars would break out all over the world. And because the single stabilizing force is the United States. And the way we do that is through the Navy. And so that's another thing people often don't understand is that we have 11 aircraft carrier groups. Okay. I think we only have like 8 or 9 operational right now. And so that's some of those, not all of those are necessarily out. Some of them are docked right now, getting, so that the sailors and airmen can get some R&R and stuff like that, and to get maintenance. Obviously, I'll have to have that maintenance and everything. But the point is that one carrier strike group has more military firepower and capabilities than most other countries' entire military put together.
Right.
So, I mean, that's why when they say like this carrier strike group moved to the Gulf or moved to the wherever, around the world, moved to the South China Sea, because the second that happens, that is a hey, you don't realize what you're about to do. If you test us, we will destroy you. And an aircraft carrier group can do that. I mean, you're talking, it can do thousands of sorties, in a very short amount of time. They're all nuclear capabilities. Like there's just so much that can happen with an aircraft carrier group.
Right.
And how powerful they are. And so force projecting around the world is very easy because we don't have to land tanks here today. We can basically hit, your entire region, wherever you are in the world, with our aircraft carrier groups and with missiles. And we could buy the time to get troops on the ground if we really needed that to happen. Our invasion can start literally any moment. Right. And so that's kind of one of those things that people don't understand is like, one aircraft carrier group could probably take out South America on its own. So
wow.
It's like, why you can't really mess with that kind of power, which is another reason why it's so important to make sure that America is always under the control of Americans who love America and want, to continue American values and follow the Constitution, because that's a lot of power that could potentially be in the hands of the wrong people.
Right. No, fair points. To switch gears again, and thank you for all that. That was really fascinating. We mentioned, we just briefly mentioned the Taliban, you spoke about Islam. On this channel, I originally started speaking almost exclusively about Sharia. My time in the Middle East, I learned and I've studied Islamic law from the Islamic law manuals. In many ways, I know Islamic law better than I guess most imams, unless they've had specialized training for many years. But I've spent years studying these manuals. I know the topic better than most people. You've spoken in the past. I listened to a couple of your talks. They were very early in the morning for me, but I got up early, especially just to listen. Islam is very, very different to Western morals, Western law, Western values, and yet people seem insistent on importing Muslims just about everywhere. Apparently they are GDP. So when you see a guy living in a tent who's raping young white European girls or robbing your neighborhood, apparently that's GDP. Either that or a future doctor or lawyer. But tell us what you observed about Islam and about the risk and the threats of Sharia, the mindsets of these people.
I think you can just look at that part of the world, right? And just this is all cultural, right? So this is all, if you go to the parts of the world that are less developed, it's not necessarily, it's not racial or ethnic. It's the culture that happens in in that whatever region we're talking about. And especially when you're talking to, Islam that follows Sharia law. It's not a culture that wants growth. It's not a culture that wants progression. It's a culture that wants to stay locked in the ways that it, has been. And it's a culture that is intolerant, like just to be honest about it. And so it can't exist in the same field as Western values or Judeo-Christian values, because the value of life is different. The value of equality is different. Justice is different, right? I mean, justice in Sharia law, justice is only for men. There's no justice for women, right? There's a woman in Sharia law that is raped could get stoned because she obviously did something to force the man to want to do that to her. So it completely takes it takes away the personal responsibility of actions and kind of and alters them into something that can be wielded for evil. And so that's where I have a problem with it. And then the other thing too is just I've been around the world, and you never get looked at with hate like you do as a Western or a Christian getting looked at by a bunch of people that worship Islam. I mean, it's just the deep seated hate that is in even the people we're helping. It's just it's something you can't unsee, and I'll never forget it. It's just kind of one of those things you can just see it in their eyes, that they if you were dead right now in front of them, they would be happier. And so it's really hard to try to coexist with that kind of mentality.
Fair enough. I spent 11 years there living amongst those people, and it's a mess for sure. It's dysfunctional in the extreme. I came across that. I mean, I'll just show a couple of things this is from the most popular English language Sharia law manual in the world, the most highly attested one as well. And in Islam, Muslims are obliged to what they call command the right, which is really to enforce the Sharia, and it's a communal obligation upon all the Muslims. And it says here, for instance, they speak here just in the introduction that they need to forbid things that go against Islam. I mean, we see this in Europe where they are harassing women. Women on trains now in Europe, in Western Europe, wear jackets when they get on the train because they don't want to reveal themselves. Otherwise, they get harassed or they get beaten or they get raped and so on. We know this is happening, right? Mm-hmm. They forbid the act verbally, so they verbally harass you. If you don't listen, they will harass you with harsh words. This means the most vile insults. Then they have to right the wrong by hand, right? This includes breaking things, smashing things, tearing things, ripping things, throwing things away. Then intimidation, then assault, then force of arms. And these last two are supposedly holy acts committed under the Sharia for the glory of Islam and Allah. And assault includes you hit them, you damage them. And if that doesn't work, you bring friends. And if that doesn't work, you escalate to weapons and you bring a gang. And this is supposedly the religion of peace, as George Bush let us know.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, and again, this is not. I think that most followers of Islam are just misled, and I don't think that every Muslim is necessarily a bad person. I just think that they are misled into thinking that, one, indoctrinated from a young age, because that happens. I mean, you can't, if you go all the way back to the when Russia was invading Afghanistan, there was a Russian colonel who said the only way that you can go into a place like Afghanistan and win is to kill every male 5 to 55. And obviously, even that was shocking to the Russians, which obviously is shocking to anybody. But if the Russians are against it, then you're probably like, okay, that's just a little bit too far. But he said that because by 5 years old, every male is indoctrinated. They're already caught into this, and it'll take a significant life event to get them out of that. And it's just one of those things is people people, especially when you believe something, you believe it so wholeheartedly and you're 100% in, and then finding out that, think about how tragic it would be then to find out that it was either false or wrong, right? And no one wants to feel that way. So they'll actively lie to themselves or actively say that it's not true just so that they don't have to feel that way. And so it is, I don't know how you differentiate the peaceful Muslims from the non-peaceful ones when they all can become non-peaceful,
Yeah, there's a concept in Islam. There are multiple doctrines in Islam. They work together. They overlap, but they're not very well known to people who are not scholars. But there's a doctrine called azima and rukhsa, strictness and relaxation or dispensation. So, when they speak of the small minority that has to be strict, right? The guys who are very obviously very, very strict hardline Muslims, the radicals or the extremists, as they get called, those are the ones following strict Islam. Because if they do not, according to the Sharia, all of Islam, the entire ummah, falls into sin, and Allah will abandon them and send them to hell. So there must be a group that is always operating at the highest level of strictness. And then the responsibility is then absolved from the rest. They don't have to. They can then literally violate the tenets of Sharia to fit in and to not be thought of as let's say, extremists by Westerners. And they will still get rewarded by Allah because they are fulfilling their role. And this then falls into other doctrines. There's one doctrines of, for instance, in Islam, within the Sharia, and I've covered this for multiple hours going through all of the Islamic references, lying is not only permissible, it is obligatory in Islam. And that's literally written in the Sharia. It's obligatory. So then they can use deceit as long as it benefits Islam, as long as it benefits the Muslims. So there's all of these layered things. So potentially there are Muslims that will tell me that, look, Muslims who are aware of this, they realize they're playing a part. And the problem is that given conditions, given certain necessary requirements, these Muslims can shift from relaxation to strictness instantly. So every Muslim male, even woman, is then potentially a sleeper cell. That's someone who can then activate at the right time. And you also don't need 100% of the population to be, shall we say, a strict adherent for them to be a major disruptive force. I mean, in Europe, the male Muslim populations between 18 and 28 is already larger than every single European army in Western Europe. I mean, that's a potential time bomb that's going off. Any thoughts on that?
That's the fear. That's the ultimate fear right there. Is you can't. I mean, there's not a bunch of Bible verses telling Christians to just go out and kill everybody, right? And kill anybody that's not a Christian. This is just not. You're not going to find that, but you will find that in the Quran. So it's hard to sit here and say we can peacefully coexist when it's just been proven time and again that they have at least, and if you want to call it Muslim leadership, if you want to call it the elites, whatever you want to call it. And I'm again not trying to misinterpret an entire group of people, but they've shown that they don't want to coexist. They want to rule and eradicate. And a caliphate isn't going to allow Christianity or Judaism or any other religion.
Right. I just want to show this. This is again from the same source. I'm not going to go. I mean, I'm not here to get too deep into this. There's a chapter here in this Sharia manual on lying, chapter R 8.0, and then there is permissible lying, R 8.2, and then lying to circumvent those forbidding the permissible. The permissible is the Sharia, is the furtherment of Islam, right? And you can lie to circumvent those trying to stop Islam from spreading. And then there is a category called obligatory lying, where Muslims must lie. This is an obligatory requirement under the Sharia, and they define it. It's not like these categories are, shall we say, carefully separated. Once you read the Sharia, you realize it's a very sophist set of laws, and lying is always obligatory, always necessary, always permissible. And as you can see on the screen, I've got that here. And I mean, I can go through various references, and you can read through them, and it explicitly discusses when to lie, how to lie, who to lie to. And I mean, this is the norm. It has a completely opposite morality to Christian and Western morality. Yeah. I mean, it's just disturbing. We have no proper mechanism for dealing with this. Tell me, you were in the Middle East. I mean, what about? It looks like Hamas. Hamas is Muslim Brotherhood. Muslim Brotherhood is heavily funded. They are not just Hamas is the Muslim Brotherhood in Palestine. I mean, that was in the original 1988 charter. It states that they are Muslim Brotherhood. Muslim Brotherhood has a 100-year plan, and we've got 3 years to go before they are supposed to overthrow the U.S. and take over the world and implement the caliphate globally, right? I mean, and of course, they're major enemy of Islam, and they've made massive inroads, massive funding into universities, all of these these pro-Hamas marches, pro-Palestine marches, and so on. What are your thoughts on that? Because I mean, this shows that they've made great strides according to their own plans.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, that's the ultimate goal. And again, people, not necessarily the same thing, but people in Europe sat back and were like, oh, everything will be fine. Everything will be fine. And then, 1930 hit, and, within 15 years, there was 20, 30 plus million dead, throughout Europe, through not even combat deaths. This is just starvation and executions.
Yeah.
And into Russia. So this is one of those things that everyone, they're like, it's so far fetched. They could never do it. They couldn't make this work. But we don't know how many Muslims came into the United States over the last 4 years. We don't know how many were on watch lists. We don't know who came in. We don't know how. I mean, there's what 2, 3. Actually, I think it's closer to 4 million Chinese nationals in the United States that we know of, and if for those of you not aware, it's Chinese law that Chinese citizens, whether they're abroad or in the homeland, have to report to their foreign intelligence agencies, and they have to spy if they're asked to. So every single Chinese national is potentially by duress a spy. So that's another thing that people don't really understand. And we're in certain countries.
Yeah,
there would be Chinese run businesses in those countries. We weren't allowed to use them because of all the information. Just even using a card or jumping on their Wi-Fi, if you walked into the building, they could compromise your information. So there's a lot of forces around the world that they don't necessarily agree with each other, but they do agree that the United States is stopping everybody from doing what they want to do.
right.
So that's what you're kind of seeing. You're seeing, especially today, these forces joining together that are against us. And again, they're not going to be friends. They're going to fight afterwards. But the key is getting rid of the United States, or at least damaging the United States where it can't force project the way that it can right now.
Right. I mean, what can we do? I mean, you're a civilian now, right? You've left the military, and you've managed to build a presence online where you inspire people. You provide really good information. You take these conspiracy theories or these bad histories head on, and you deal with them. What can others do? I mean, people who aren't you, what can they do? What can they learn so that within their own circle they can make an effort?
I think looking at history, not Wikipedia, not your online. You can't even really trust the encyclopedia stuff anymore. You really need to go and read some history from really just the last 150 years. Just go back 150 years and read as much as you can. Hard copy books that are not online necessarily, and just kind of see what has already happened, because it's all just kind of recocking and rehappening again over and over again. It just gets a little more drastic each time, and World War II was the last drastic one, and now I just feel like we're building up to something equally drastic to happen again. We just you have Russia and Ukraine, which is essentially at this point is now just a testing ground. They're just testing new ways to wage warfare in a literally in a legal manner, I guess you could say. Not that necessarily war is legal, but you know what I'm saying, that they could reach a agreement tomorrow if they decided they were done testing everything. But I mean, this, and it's not just them two. Europe, the United States, China, North Korea, they're all kind of in on it. I mean, there's North Korean troops in China, or sorry, not in China, in
Ukraine.
Russia. Yeah, in Ukraine, Russia. So there's a lot going on. That would be the first thing. Just understand, at least go back to World War II, maybe World War I, so you understand the dynamics of, Europe at the time. And then just read about World War II and read about the rise of communism, of socialism, and of fascism in Europe, and how it kind of manifested. And it was all really the same people, just with differing ideas of how to gain power. And that's kind of,
But your enemies have anticipated you. I mean, look at the recent push to demonize Winston Churchill, for instance, and to state that we fought on the wrong side, that Winston Churchill was the bad guy.
Yeah, no, it's all revisionist history, and it's narrative building, and it's propaganda. That's why, and the reason propaganda works is because a lot of people are not versed on real history, so they get told, like, those quotes. They always do it about Patton. They always share those fake quotes.
Yeah, that's a totally false quote. I know, it's incredible.
They never existed. Nothing. They found one passage where he said something negative about Jews one time or something like that, and they're like, he was a wild anti-Semite, and he thought we should fight with Hitler. Like, no, he didn't. He actually, there's numerous of his journal entries where he talks about how terrible Hitler was. He just also talks about how terrible Stalin was, because he's communist, right? And the things that he knew happening there. And so he was if we're up to Patton, we would have marched on Stalingrad, which is probably what we should have done. And then we wouldn't be in the same water we are today if we would have just kept going. We're already on the warpath. But that's the other thing is war a lot of times is dictated by public opinion, and what needed to be done wasn't done, because at the end of the day, everyone was like, we just want our men home. We've lost millions, which is completely understandable. I mean, the war was a drastic thing that changed not only the landscape of Europe, but also the landscape of the United States. So yeah, I think the narratives, and I think people not understanding, where all this is coming from. Like, they don't understand how much Qatar is putting in, how much money. They don't understand, Yeah,
I did an analysis of that. You can actually go through, the government publishes donations to universities, as long as, only if it exceeds the threshold of $250,000. If it's under that, they can make the money disappear. But of the published figures, I went through those figures, it is to the tune of billions of dollars. China, Saudi, and Qatar are like the biggest donors, and they've put tens of billions of dollars probably. I mean, the recorded figures are probably, even the FBI says these numbers are probably, from what I'd seen at the time when I did going through the public records, the available numbers are only probably half of what there actually has been, because they can split it up or give it to their cousin who then sends it. And what does 10, 15 billion dollars over 8 or 9 years buy you in terms of influence at the top, say the top 20 US universities? I mean, people, I've got the figures, I've got the charts, I've done it in detail. I've gone through the actual graphs and numbers from the public records, and even from other sources like Time Magazine and whatnot, The Economist and so on. Israel, for instance, I think you put $500,000 into Georgetown. I think the year we looked at was 2018. Israel put in $500,000 into Georgetown, going to biotech research, basically hydrology and farming, right? They invested into farming technology and water technology for farms. Right. And then Qatar and Saudi had both put in like $115 million, 200 times more money. And everyone goes, and then everyone goes, oh my God, Israel is trying to propagandize the world. You're like, what's $500,000 going to buy you? And what do you get from $250 million in the same period?
Oh yeah, I mean, and that's another thing, is that people don't understand how much $1 billion is, and then they definitely don't understand how much $1 trillion is. It's it's like an abstract concept that you can't conceptualize. A lot of people can't conceptualize like how much it is.
Yep.
I did a post months back just to kind of explain the differences in let's see if I can find it. And if you look at, like, instead of dollars, if you look at it in time, so you take, a trillion seconds. How long is a trillion seconds? Oh, let me see real quick if I can find
That's
this.
probably a lot of years. I mean, yeah, that's going to be, yeah.
Oh, it's like it's like 37,000 or something. Oh, let me pull it up. If I can.
Yeah.
But yeah, so I mean that's another thing is that they don't realize, like, Qatar, and some of these countries are making, so much money off of oil or off of natural gas or off of whatever minerals that they're selling now that are that they're moving across the world, and then they have unregulated funds that they're kind of able to do with whatever they want. All right, so here it is. It's a million seconds is 11 days. A billion seconds is 31 years. A trillion seconds is 31,709 years. So, like,
Wow.
when you put it in that kind of perspective, right, and you realize a trillion is a vast number that is it's incomprehensible to most of us because it's so much.
Yeah, I did this talk. This is a series of slides, 72 slides. I did a bunch of detailed research with all the sources. This is college foreign gift reporting. That's it. And I went through the spreadsheets and I worked out the totals. And we've got here, for instance, this was just for one. This is about 3 years old now, but so the data is a little older. But if you look at the UAE pumped in $230 million into the top US universities. Israel, over the same period, okay, I'm not sure what year this was or if it's over a given number of years, but $53 million. The vast majority of that was put into biotech, right? Then you look at there's 51 Islamic countries. China put in $680 million, right? 53 million versus 680 million that we know of. And then you take countries like Kazakhstan and Kuwait put in more money than Israel. But once you look at it, the top five, right, it's $2.2 billion for just that period, which is 42 times more than Israel. But apparently Israel's the problem. And then everyone's going, okay, so these countries put in $3.8 billion, but that's somehow not a problem for these Islamic countries. Plus China. I mean, that is 69.7 times total, 69.7 times more than the spend from Israel. Just under 70 times for the period that I calculated here. But this is apparently is, so I mean, everyone overlooks this because they hate Jews, right? And yet they give Islam a pass. And I think Islam is using this money. I mean, they must benefit if they're going to put in billions of dollars. And this is just what we know of. Clearly, they're getting some kind of advantage from this.
Right. And you also have to remember that a lot of these nations, they don't have, again, they don't have like the safeguards. They don't have the restrictions. The United States has a very vast GDP and has a lot of money coming in too. But these nations, they're making tons of money and they're not sharing it with anyone. They don't have social programs that they don't have welfare and Medicaid and all this kind of other things that they're putting all their money into basically foreign to overthrow, foreign powers that they disagree with. Right. And so, and then like encompassing all Jews into, because there's Jewish people that are not practicing Jewish, faith, practicing Judaism. But then they're all lumped together though, whether you practice Judaism or not, which means that you could have two completely different worldviews. It'd be like, you're not a Christian, but you're a white dude. So we're throwing you all, you're the same as all Christians. And which is silly. It's a silly way to think about things. And so, so I'm always like, well, who are these? And then they'll list off a few successful Jewish people. And I'm like, okay, but so because they're Jewish, they're 100% behind this Jewish conspiracy to overthrow the world. Right. But meantime, we're not worried about what you just pointed out, the 4 billion that we know about that has been going from Islamic countries into our universities. They're not worried about the massive amounts of influence and money that China puts in every year, the intellectual integrity, the property that has been stolen by China just in the last 30, 40 years alone is irreplaceable. And so there's real threats out there, and a lot of people are falling for the narrative that they're thinking that the wrong threats are the real threats, and it's not true.
Thank you for that. Yeah, no, we had a question that said, which is the real threat, Islam or China? But I mean, these are false dichotomies, because I would say both. I mean, what are your thoughts?
Yeah, absolutely. Like I said, these are not two necessarily groups of people that are gonna always agree. China doesn't want any religion to foster, right? They're an atheist state, and they actively persecute religious people. So obviously they're not going to just like join up with Islamic countries and be like, we're going to be best friends now and we're going to live together forever. No, they're saving that war later, because that's an easier war that they can win later. They're perfectly content in working together and pooling money and using common having a common enemy in the United States or the West, and then pushing to strain those together. So yeah, I think you have to be equally as worried about them, because when it comes down to it, whether it's going to be one event that is going to set everything off.
Yeah. Tell me, are you there? Hi, I think your audio dropped off. Are you there?
Did I come back?
Yeah, I think so. I'll leave you both on stream right now just to be safe, because your audio disappeared on the one, but you came back as a second window. But it's fine. I'll leave it both running.
Hold on, let me see.
Yeah.
I don't know what happened. It's a disconnect, and then.
Oh, there you're back. That's fine. We're good. Yeah. Do you want to finish your thought? Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, they're gonna, whatever way it happens, it's gonna happen with them together. Because again, they have a common enemy, which is stopping them from trying to get, to complete the goals that they have for their view of the world. I mean, China, with One Belt, One Road, with all of their other initiatives they have, I mean, China works on 100-year plans because they know that their tyrannical governments are going to continue to stay in power, because they have thus far, despite massive amounts of loss, from the 19th century, from like when Mao took power. There's still the same leadership involved there, right? At least the same. They're somewhat a little bit less ruthless, I guess you could say, but it's still pretty much the same ideology that was fostered.
Different methods. I think the outcomes they're looking for are similar, but just different method.
Mm-hmm.
And I've got a handful. I've still got 7 questions that I've kind of got here, but I just want to change gears for a moment. Look, I live in Europe. I come from Africa, and I've said on the channel before, because I lived in the Middle East. I traveled extensively. Being in the Lebanon was an eye opener for me. Going to the Bekaa Valley, and I spent a little bit of time amongst the genuine refugees from Syria, who were living in absolute poverty. I mean, it was heart-wrenching. I mean, truly heart-wrenching to see people dressed in rags. I mean, living in plastic tents, like 4 poles buried in the ground, and then thick, wide plastic wrap around, and that's how they were living in these Red Cross camps. And it was, I mean, genuinely heart-rending. And then in Europe, the Bataclan, and you look at all these quote-unquote refugees coming in with their Ray-Bans, their fancy cell phones, their jeans that I can't afford, fancy shoes, but they're refugees apparently, And then in Poland, for instance, a couple of years back, there were these very commonly. Look, I worked in close protection. So I can't claim to be at your level, but I worked in close protection. I did diplomatic security, private security, and so on. Mm-hmm. And I think I can spot a threat. I grew up, let's say, in a bad neighborhood, right? So, and I'm still here to talk about it. But I would see groups of young men, 19 to 22, walking around typically in groups of 3. Every time I'd be around them, it's like, that little spider sense that goes off, you know what I mean?
Mhm.
I get that. And I mean, man, that hasn't gone away, right? And you don't see it anymore. It's like the Polish government realized and it started to clean this up. Even the taxi drivers were suspect as hell. And I've I've basically been telling people for years that I think Western Europe is going to burn. It's a slow motion train wreck. It's a slow revolution, but don't you feel that this tension, that this wire is really tight and something's going to snap? Don't you feel that
Yeah.
the pushback is coming, that they can't keep a lid in it much longer? Because I feel like two forces are coming to a head, and I don't think the West will lose. I think there'll be chaos, certainly, but we have the numbers, right? And the
Mhm.
will at the end of the day, because the dominoes, once they fall, you're talking a minority versus a majority. But don't you feel there's something's about to go down?
Yeah, I mean, if you just look around the world and kind of see the tensions where they are, and they're only getting, it's just getting fuel dumped on it every single day with more and more propaganda to push the division, um and people aren't going to realize how bad it actually is until it does go down, until France is on fire, until Western Europe is on fire. And I mean, if you look at there's a reason why Jordan and Egypt ejected a bunch of Palestinians and then wouldn't and built walls and won't let
Kuwait
Palestinians in,
too.
because they've tried to start revolutions every time they were let in. And so this happens all over the Middle East. So it's not just they're not just trying to take over just Western civilization. They're any other regime in the area too, even if they're fellow Muslims, that if they don't believe the exact same type of Islam, right, or the exact same sect of it, they're gonna push to take that over too. And so it's, I mean, how many refugees are in Europe at this point? From the Middle East, we
Millions.
know. Yeah, so I mean, you take that amount of people, and if you're able to mobilize half of them, you don't need more than half. You mobilize half of them, and that overwhelms social services. That overwhelms any kind of response that you could have,
It's
and then now
already
you're
doing
left with
so.
military.
If you think of Pakistani births in the UK, I mean, there's what, UK is roughly 7% Muslims. I think 5 to 8 million Muslims, apparently, give or take.
Mhm.
And you're looking at a population of maybe 5 million is absorbing 33% of the resources of the NHS. So you're talking a tiny fraction of the population is absorbing more than a third of the budget as well as the resources. So already they're putting strain, denying services. I mean, this is kind of like a fourth generation warfare. It's undercutting the population through other means,
Mhm.
denying services, and it's causing resentment. Though, your
Yeah.
thoughts on that?
Yeah, I mean, one example I use and this is something that terrorist organizations are very good at, is they'll
Mhm.
spend a very small amount of money to enact a change in their enemies that will cost their enemies billions. So think about 9/11. 9/11 was what, 400, 500K maybe total is what it cost them to do
Mhm.
that. Our response to 9/11 was to lock down every federal building and federal military base in the country and abroad.
Mhm.
Just for Fort Bragg alone, it was initially about 30-40 million. And then it's another annual, I don't remember what it is, 10 or something million annually after that, to upkeep all of those implementations. And then now you stretch that, across the United
Yeah,
States. What cost them 400, 500K cost us billions and billions of dollars. And so just
correct.
that kind of response, it's the same. Yeah, it's a different kind of warfare. It's an economic warfare. But they're using it well because they understand our morals and our I guess you could say what we will do to ensure that certain things don't happen again, and they use that against us.
Yeah, I mean, I just don't see how there's a simple response within the law because they're abusing the law. But you just like in the UK, the whole flag controversy now, where people are getting arrested for literally raising the UK flag in the UK.
Yeah,
And of course, raising the LGBT flag or the Hamas flag is just fine, right? Even though it's a terrorist group. But I mean, I get the feeling that people are at some point going to react very negatively already. You can see it's boiling, but at
Mhm.
some point, I sense it has to boil over. There's going to come a point where the government cannot contain it, and government needs to pick a side here because their loyalty does not seem to be to their natives, and somehow, there's this cowardice just managing of the decline rather than the willingness or the courage to deal with the issue. At what point you say this is a threat, it is incompatible, it needs to go? I mean, we're in a bit of a bind. I mean, your thoughts on that, and how does one solve this?
It is hard because, I mean, in the United States, you have freedom of religion. So the government can't tell you what you can or cannot believe. That's a core principle that we believe in, but then you
But
have,
Islam is a political system. According to its own definition, it's a deen,
right,
which is a political system like communism or fascism.
right,
It's no
right.
different.
I agree, but most people don't understand that. Most people think of it just as a religion, and then they protect it under that, under U.S. law. So I don't know I don't know what happens with that. I mean, I think it does hit a breaking point, and eventually something drastic happens, and then assuming everything survives after that point, then there will be strict change enacted, and there'd be amendments to the U.S. Constitution. There'll be amendments to different European nations' constitutions and how they're gonna go about this in the future. But I mean, at the end of the day, if something drastic does happen, I mean, especially in Europe, I mean, is it going to be enough to wake up the rest of Europe and the United States? I don't
I
know.
think so. I get the sense that that one country is going to be an island: Spain, France, Germany, Belgium, UK, very likely. I think that once the first mover does whatever it does, I think it then gives permission to the rest. And we're seeing the rise, but also the suppression of right-wing parties and efforts to suppress them through legal means, illegal means, and so on, lawfare. But I just get the feeling that once it tips, it is going to be explosive because I think the resentment's been building up for a long time. Those are my thoughts. Anyway. I don't see a good ending for this. I think it's going to go very poorly. And
No,
Europe,
there's no good ending for it. Just like there's no good ending for the United States economically unless we can completely start to reverse course and start knocking out some of our debt and stop spending money like it's a fake thing that just exists in the ether somewhere. There's no easy way out of it, and that's why when you're talking about like, hey, we got to balance the budget. Well, to do that is going to be some hard decisions that have to be made, and some things are going to have to go without funding, and it's going to affect people's lives, and that's the reality of the situation we're at today. And the same thing in Europe, and from that other standpoint, from the amount of refugees that they've let in, eventually you're going to have to deal with this problem, and it's only going to get harder and harder as it goes on. As it's allowed to just continue to manifest and fester. But whereas you could rip the Band-Aid off now, or you could, wait until you have to cut the whole limb off. But eventually something negative, it's not going to be pretty. And that's just the way of the world. You can't just expect to have your cake and eat it too. And then everything's just going to be fine one day. We'll be fine. No one will be hurt from this type of mentality. And that's the mentality we have. And, that's people use the arguments. Well, we can't do away with Medicaid because then people will die. Well, guess what? What's going to happen when our money, like superinflation hits and our money completely devalues because we've been playing with fake funds, So, I mean, what is it? In the last 5 years, I think it's in the last 5 years, they've printed
90% of the money that's been printed since the start of last century.
Yeah. So within the last 5 years, we've generated all of this money out of nowhere. Like, where does the math stop mathing? When does it stop working? And then what happens then? Then lots of people die. Then lots of people are without. Because that could lead to supply chain disruptions. So then once you're no longer getting food and water in, then what happens from there? So it's one of those things like we're gonna have some hard discussions,
Right.
and we're gonna have to. Basically battlefield triage is gonna have to happen, and you're gonna have to make some hard decisions. You're gonna have to lose some things so that the whole can make it.
Right. Yeah, I've got some specific questions I want to get through. Because also, I don't know how much time I have with you, so I don't want to keep you obviously too long. But how do we spot information warfare? How do we combat this? And
Man,
what's the method you use?
Again, one way is to be just to be knowledgeable about history, because that's one of the main ways they push stuff. They try to say that certain things happened in history this way, and now this is why you should think of this way. So they do that with Hitler all the time. They do that. They're like, Hitler burned transvestite books, so he must have been on the right side. And you're like, well, he burned every book written by any Jew. He burned versions of the Bible that he didn't agree with. Like, he burned a lot of books. He burned any science book that he thought went against Nazi, beliefs. Like, there's a lot that he burned. So knowing history will help you with a lot of that. But then just also the sources that you're getting information from. The really big accounts on X, the really big news sites, you just got to be very, very careful. It's called 1440. I don't know if you've ever heard of that. It's unbiased news. All they do, there's like every headline is literally just what happened. Man shot in grocery store. 14, like that's all it'll say. Or it'll be like whatever happened, bomb, whatever. So 1440 is one of my favorite ones. And once you subscribe to it, they'll send you emails, but then you can go through and you can just like search through their articles. But it is as close to unbiased reporting on any subject as you can get, right? There's not an agenda. It's more just about getting the information out there. So that would be a good one to look at. And so when I see information from some of these other sources, whether they're right-wing or left-wing sources on, the big mass media, or whether it's the big accounts on X or on YouTube or whatever it is, I always kind of go by one of these and then look at it from that angle too, that they're reporting it, because you're going to see some different things said. You're going to see some different wordage used, and that'll definitely help. And then once you can kind of recognize that if this title of this article that you're about to read from the Wall Street Journal, from whatever, if that title is inducing an emotional response, if it is using language that is driving an emotional response, whether it's something you agree with or whether it's something you disagree with, either way, if it's using an emotional response for that, it's probably trying to angle it in a certain light without you even knowing it. So
it's structured along the lines of rhetoric rather than logic, right? Let's say,
right. Like go in and click on one of those. And just like pull up just it doesn't matter what article, any article. So yeah, it'll say, it'll kind of tell you right here. So right, migrant deportations, and then it'll go through what's happening, and it's non-biased language. So you can read this, you can easily see, this is exactly what's happening. It's all factual stuff that's happening, and it's just the accounts, right? No fillers, no adjectives. It's this is how all of their articles are. So I fall back on that a lot.
So the structure of the language tells you, because look, advertising language, I've explained to people on the channel, I was trained in the use of language when I was working as well, because you can learn a lot from how people use language. If someone's trying to sell you something, like an ad, for instance, it's kind of obvious. The tone, the structure, how they start, how they carry through, they try to describe something to make you imagine. Whereas if someone's just giving you facts, what's the time? It's 3:00. Mm-hmm. Versus, when you think about, the two of us on that beautiful cruise down to the beach, and I'm stroking your shoulder, and you can hear they're two totally different things. And so language is a clue, and that's a good point. Yeah.
Yeah, again, you can tell if the language is loaded, and just by reading it. Like I said, if it in any way is trying to elicit an emotional response from you or somebody else, whether you disagree with it or not, whatever it's saying, if you look at it and you're like, oh wait, that headline seems a little bit, like it's literally telling me to think that this is bad, or it's literally telling me to think
Right.
this is good.
Yeah, it's trying to
Yeah.
presuppose a certain conclusion in
Yes.
your mind, or somehow it's trying to lead you. It's trying to, I mean, something that I was taught, it's like what you can get, people, if you try to give people facts, very often they might reject it, right? But what you can get someone to imagine, they will perceive as their own thought, and they won't reject it. That's to get past the censor. And I mean, so I learned from this how to be able to spot this. But yeah, that's well said. A different question. I mean, mindset. What is, you seem to have a very particular mindset. Insults or attempts to rile you up just seem to wash off you. What mindset tips would you give others for dealing with this? Because clearly everything that's happening is trying to create chaos, disorder, uncertainty, and unsettled people are easier to manipulate. How do you stay calm, and what would you teach people?
I mean, I say this before, like, no, I'm not getting shot at right now, so no one's shooting at me or trying to kill me on the internet, at least not yet. So when people, it's always kind of just laughable to me when people like, talk crap or do something on the internet behind. I'm like, bro, I don't even know who, like, one, you don't know who I am, and I don't know who you are. Like, there's no chance of us meeting. It's really easy to throw out whatever you want. But again, it's people are always, you can't please everybody, and two, somebody's always going to disagree with you. That's just the way it is. So you can either stand by your principles or you can, be a flag flapping in the wind and go whichever way the wind blows. And I have my views. I feel like I have a very good grasp of what is right and wrong, and especially like what is good for our country and what is not good for our country. So I stand up for those, and standing up for American values and the U.S. Constitution, and all that. That doesn't. So if you're mad about that, you're not really someone that's ever gonna take a moment of my time, emotionally, anyways. And I try to look at things from a non-emotional standpoint. And so, like, you start talking crap, like, okay, well, we're not gonna do this because there's nothing that, like, why would I continue? Like, we're just gonna curse each other on the internet for a few minutes, like, whatever, dude, just move on. So I would say, like, there's trolls, there's people that are always going to want to push and try to elicit a response or try to do something. When I first started out on X, I was a little bit more combative than I am today. Eventually you just realize that, like, some people are going to be dumb and some people are going to choose to believe something completely wrong just because they do. And you just be like, okay, well, have fun with that in your life.
You make me think of something. There's a lesson that I've discussed on the channel before, is you don't have to win every battle. And there's the Ash conformity experiments. I know there's a lot of bad psychology out there, but this is a repeatable, very well-founded experiment where, for instance, they would pay a group of people or convince a group of people to work together to fool one particular person who wasn't aware. So they draw, let's say, a rabbit, a horse, and a duck on a blackboard. Right, and they when they point at the rabbit, everyone would say, that's a duck. When they point at the horse, everyone would say, that's a lawnmower. And eventually the person who wasn't in on the game would eventually just go along with it because it was embarrassing. They found that the social pressure would cause them to actually go along just to not have to deal with the shame or embarrassment. And it was very, very effective. But then conversely, what Dr. Ash discovered was that if one person had the courage, this works whether it's a group of 5 or a group of 10,000. If one person had the courage to speak up and say, sorry, but no, I'm not going to fall under this magic spell. I reject this. That's a bloody duck. Forget it. That's a duck. That is not a mouse. That's not a horse. That's a duck. What happened was that the propaganda that was being foisted to literally cause people to lie to themselves actually was reduced in effectiveness by 80%. Just one person. And they would actually snap a lot of people out of it and encourage other people. So, which is why censorship is so important, because the voice of one person is an extremely powerful tool, which is why in the UK, for instance, they punish people for speaking up or for taking an action that can go against the narrative. Your thoughts?
Yeah, no, I mean, and that's why like, I'm a firm believer that America is one of the last real bastions of freedom out there, because it's mainly due to the Second Amendment. The Second Amendment protects the First Amendment. And without that, you're left with a government that could easily go tyrannical at any moment. And this is true throughout history. Any government can, whether it be a change in power or whether it be a slow evolution of tyranny over time, they can still. I mean, people are getting they're getting arrested in the United States too, actually. So for it, but praying in front of abortion clinics, like I don't care what you believe, yes or no. Like if you believe protesting is okay, then you should be able to protest anywhere, right? And you shouldn't be arrested for standing up for something that you believe in. And
that's praying silently, just standing there praying.
Praying. Yeah, they're not even saying nothing. I can understand if they're like hurling expletives and like throwing stuff at people. Like, yeah, okay, remove them. They don't need to be there. I mean, again, but just standing there praying or just getting arrested for saying anything. I mean, getting arrested for your social media posts, which is happening in the UK as well, and in Europe. So just stuff like that. That's a slippery slope. I mean, it gets to a point where the right people get in, or I guess you could say the wrong people get into power, and then want to stop that from happening. Just like if you go back to Nazi Germany, I mean, that's what fascism is built on. Is built on oppressing your ideological, suppressing the views of your ideological opponents, right? I mean, that's you don't allow them to speak. You don't allow them to combat your ideas, and that's the way that you fight them.
Shouldn't we take inspiration from that your voice is powerful? There's a reason they try to censor you.
Exactly. Yeah. I mean, I'm even against the censorship that X has, and I'm kind of a free speech absolutist, whereas you can say literally anything you want to me. You could tell me anything you want. You could call me the worst names or say you're going to kill me or whatever. And, honestly, it's not going to bother me. Those are your words, and your words can't directly hurt me right now. Mm-hmm. I understand the laws like on inciting violence, right? I mean, that, stuff like that. And then I even understand the threats, right? You have to kind of take those seriously, especially from certain people, especially if they've shown that they're, prone to do something. I understand that, but it's still one of those things. It's like, where do you draw the line as the government deciding what you can say? Something is what you can and cannot say, like who's the one that decides all that at the end of the day? And then how do we know it doesn't shift tomorrow and then the next day? And then to the point where now I can't say anything without getting arrested, right? So that's just kind of it's a slippery slope paradigm for sure.
So what do you see your role right now? I mean, what is your role, and what can people do to help you in your mission?
I just poke holes, man. I just poke holes in narratives and things that are false, and then just try to. One thing I'm trying to start doing is re-highlight lots of things from history. I'm going to go more military aspect of it, obviously, just because my base is more military enthusiasts and things like that. Mm-hmm. But just highlighting history, highlighting things that happened in history. One of the courses I managed before I got out of the Army was higher level planning course, and we had to all the students had to go through and go through an insurgency or a revolution that happened, and then write a paper on it, and the ins and outs of why it happened, and kind of just an analysis of it. And that was what really opened my eyes was, I've heard about some of these, different insurgencies, revolutions, like all the way, even the smaller ones that people don't necessarily hear about all the time. I'd heard about them, but I didn't really know about them. And so then as I started reading all these different papers and getting the analysis from from all these smart people that are taking the time to look into this stuff from their own perspectives, then you really can see the what's happened in history, and then how you can see the fruits of it starting again. So that's what's kind of scary for me is seeing the same things happening in the world over mm-hmm. again that happened, in the turn of the 19th century.
I still think, despite the issues, I still think we have reason to be positive. You still see sanity prevail in Central and Eastern Europe still. which is, I think, a beacon and an example to others. But I also see the warrior spirit rising in the West.
Mhm.
I see it in the UK. I see it in people I know in France and Germany. There are people, and it doesn't take everyone. It just takes a spark.
Right.
Sometimes you just need to be the spark. And I mean, I do try to want to inspire people. If you don't have to be a sand dune, you just need to be a few grains of sand that will grind some gears, right? A few
Absolutely.
pebbles can start an avalanche. Those are things that I like to think about. I mean, I believe you are inspiring people and you're giving people hope, and they go out and they become little warriors inspired by you. I think you're a ripple. You cause a ripple effect.
Yeah, I mean, again, that's having people that are willing to, and I mean, I don't think I know everything, but I have a pretty decent grasp of the world, and I just feel like that needs to be shared, because there's a lot of people that just don't. I mean, there's people in my family that after I talked to them about things, they were like, I had no idea that like stuff like that happened or was going down, or like there's a lot of people that are just in their bubbles, and they see their funny TikToks, and then every once in a while their Instagram feed comes up with something, and then they're like, oh, well, I saw that on Instagram, so it must be real. So combating that is what's going to be the hard thing.
There's that saying, it's like, about the nation, beware the nation that has its thinking done by cowards and its fighting done by fools. We need intelligent warriors, And Philip here mentions this 12-year-old girl in Scotland with the knife, with the cleaver and the axe. I mean, yeah, that's Braveheart right there, right? And I mean, I think the Crusader spirit is, I mean, to coin a phrase, is what is being awoken in people in the West, that they're starting to feel the threat, because they've been prevented from talking about it, but they're now able to talk about the problem. Especially X has opened that avenue where people can rally around the problem, call out the enemy, identify the problem. Before you couldn't. You were labeled and censored, ostracized, canceled if you did, but now you can, which means that people can identify the enemy, form a group that will deal with it. So this dynamic is changing. Just the fact that X allows this, I think, is changing the dynamic, the social dynamic already.
Oh yeah. I mean, I'm a strong believer that Musk buying X was kind of the catalyst that allowed free speech to kind of, I mean, yeah, they'll censor certain types of things, but all in all, it's pretty much as free speech as you're going to get on social media these days.
Yeah.
Where you can say something and not worry about getting banned for it. Yeah, I mean, that's just the goal, again, one person's eyes that you open up, and to get them to start looking a little bit more and start, just diagnosing a little bit more, like, hey, what am I seeing right here? And is this genuine, or should I look into this a little bit more before I like make an opinion about this? That's really the goal here, is just, hey, you don't have to agree with every little thing I say, but if it causes you to look at a narrative and be like, let's look into this a little bit more. Maybe I'll self-learn a little bit about what actually happened in this time frame, or what happened between these people, or just to better understand it. And I mean, I read all the time. I listen to, if I'm driving or I'm going anywhere, I'm listening to different audiobooks on history and on, podcasts on ancient Greece, ancient Rome, just go through all of history just to get a little glimpse, and there's different takes. So sometimes you have to listen to different things about the same subject, just to kind of find a middle ground with what what's actually real. But that's that's the goal. That's the main goal. And then that's what I would just tell people that want to be, if you want to be informed, look at history, and all the answers are going to be there, because you'll see it happening again and again.
Interesting. I'm glad that you enjoy the historical method. I mean, we share many common values, and there's the old Chinese proverb: if you want to know the future, study the past. Look to the root, to know the branches, or something like that. I just want to show one thing, and then I have one question for you, because we should wind down now. And I mean, it's been really interesting for me. This is something that I wrote on the Muslim Brotherhood in America. I did a report for a group some time back, which they used to actually speak to an American senator, a guy from Texas. What's his name? They edited and they submitted the paper. No, not in the form as I have it here, but to, oh, good grief, his name will come to me. But anyways, this was part of the effort by this advocacy group to get the Muslim Brotherhood banned. And one thing that I wrote was I had to do an analysis of these guys. So this is a fairly long paper on the history and methods, but that the enemy wants to inhibit critical analysis and they want to design arguments that inspire negative outcomes. And you need to have the historical method and you need to think with reason. I mean, you mentioned ancient Greece. So obviously looking at Aristotle, at logic and knowing history, right? Knowing the facts, but they want to inspire shame because you do not critically examine or defend what you're ashamed of. You retreat. So they're like, you're a racist. You come from a family of slave owners or a culture of slave owners. You Americans were slave owners. You guys took over the world. You know, things of that type, right? And you can only defeat that with facts. Amnesia, you cannot be inspired by or draw from what you forgot or what you do not know. So they want to erase history so that they give you false history. They want to make you ashamed of history. They want to erase your history so you do not find inspiration from the things. Like we should be inspired by, let's say, the Crusaders instead of being ashamed of them. Now, certainly you can point to errors in any human endeavor, but what they did was delay the invasions of Europe and save Christendom. And finally, irrationality. They want to destroy logic and evidence that's from history with rhetoric, propaganda, and emotion. So these are the three prongs. And if you can identify these things, you know, that they want to enforce shame, amnesia, or irrationality, you know you're dealing with information warfare. This was like a heuristic that I sort of developed worked on this. And we have to fight back. So we have to fight against all of these things. Your thoughts, and I have one more question and we can close. But your thoughts on that?
Yeah, no, I mean that's a perfect example of the way that arguments are fashioned. Again, it's always something, whether, you know, they are going to use those exact three things to try to vilify your idea or ideology or whatever argument you're trying to make. So yeah, I agree with that 100%.
Well, thank you. Last question then. Just in terms of prepared, let's say something, I don't know, the Muslim Brotherhood kicks off their plan in 2028 as they supposedly intend to, or Al-Qaeda's 5-step plan or whatever it is comes to fruition, or these cells that potentially have infiltrated. Like I have someone who's former CIA, who I've spoken to a couple of times, and she's a contact of mine, and she's done some interesting field work, and she speaks of the Tiger teams that the Chinese special forces that the Chinese have trained and then sent across the border. So you've got these refugees that are actually trained special forces designed to do things like light sabotage, little things, and they're testing. They'll destroy little power generators, power sources across the US, you know, pinprick attacks, testing responses, and so on. What if things do kick off tomorrow, for argument's sake? How should the average person watching prepare? What should they do?
If so, the key is going to be either moving quickly or then waiting to move after it's safe. And so I know that sounds like an oxymoron, but if something is going to happen, so something big happens, especially in population centers, and it's in a population center that you're located in, I'm talking big cities, you're going to want to get out immediately. So that first 36 to 72 hours is going to be where everybody kind of decides what they're going to do. So really, until about 36 hours, the roads are going to be still clear. You'll be able to get out and you'll be able to go somewhere, you know, less populated, to to somewhere you know, or somewhere you know is safe, right? Everyone else is going to wait for that word, because most people don't think that anything bad can happen, right? They don't think that they can go, that water can get shut off and power can get shut off, and that, you know, there would be no emergency response. There'd be no, all these things, right? Until it's too late, until that's already happening. And once that happens, that's going to be the mad rush to get everybody out of these population centers. So that'll happen 36 to 72 hours after any kind of major event. So it's either think quickly and move at that point, or you really need to wait about anywhere from 1 to 2 weeks, depending on what's going on. Because within that 72-hour mark and that next 2-week mark is when most of the people in population centers are going to perish. So that's the big window that's going to be very dangerous. Everywhere you go will be dangerous, but especially places that you would go for survival needs. So grocery stores and stuff like that, because again, if power and water is disrupted, or a major event happened and law enforcement's no longer reacting the way it should, or emergency services aren't reacting the way they should, most people are going to run out of food within that 3 to 4 days, and so that's when they're going to start getting desperate. And then if there's no running water anymore, say for instance, now people are going to start making moves to go get water, right? And so this is all going to create conflict in very dense zones, and that's going to lead to a lot of carnage and a lot of chaos. So that's what you'd want to be. Either you're going to get out quickly and you're going to go somewhere safe to weather the storm, or you're going to have enough food and water to last you for about 2 weeks, so that you can wait till everything calms down, and then you can kind of make your way to wherever you need to go.
Yeah. In Europe, though, they're restricted from having weapons here. I could get my gun license, buy a weapon. I mean, I'm fairly competent with the gun, let's say. But I could get one, but very few people in Western Europe have the luxury of being able to own a firearm. Although I know there are lots of fantastic automatic crossbows now, up to 18 shots in a mag. So that's something to think about. What about folks in Europe who, because I think if they could well be, something could kick off. I mean, I've seen in South Africa, these things happen. So to me, it's a movie I have seen before. Any thoughts for people in Europe who don't have ready answers?
Yeah, I mean, I don't know all the laws in Europe. Whatever firearms you are allowed to get, hunting or whatever you're allowed to get in your country, I would
Friends have done that.
Yep, I would get as many of them as you can have. And then bows, crossbows, or any other kind of projectile that you could make work. That would be obviously something important. And then you would just go to your kind of knives, machete type things to protect yourself. But again, the main thing is going to be just knowing when is safe to move and when is not safe to move. Because ideally you don't want to get caught dealing with a bunch of people in a bunch of desperate people, regardless of how well armed you are or not, right? Because it might just come down to you could get overwhelmed by enough people, and there will be desperate people all over the place. So yeah, I mean, having a go bag with all your, I would recommend everyone have a go bag in each vehicle that has your standard survival stuff, extra food, extra water, maybe a weapon or two, and some stuff like that. Have a go bag that's easily accessible at your house too. That might be a little bit bigger, but something you could just grab and go real fast. Has changes of clothes. Has stuff that'll help you survive for a 2 to 3 day journey, depending on where you need to go in the United States. And then back roads. Just have an actual old style road map. A state one, a local one, and then a state, and then have like a road atlas that has all the states on it, but try to avoid major thoroughfares. So interstates are out, like your main, like if you're in downtown Dallas, you're not getting on 75 to get out of Dallas, right? Because you're just jumping into the middle of all the interstates all together. So you're going to want to take some side roads and get out, and go, even if it takes you an extra 6 hours of driving, right? That's worth it. Getting bogged down and getting locked into the middle of a highway. So, I mean, that's one of the things they do get right in those movies a lot, is that where every avenue for someone to get out and there's just cars just lined on these highways, that absolutely would happen.
Yeah. Luckily I live out towards the countryside, so it's kind of, just one last point. You know what? Actually, I've had some good weapons training, let's say, in the States and other places, but I mean, I keep weapons close to me, just so everyone knows. This is a knife I was gifted. I've been given a lot of these. I have an whole arsenal. This is a fantastic tool. It is one of the most. This is a nasty piece of kit that I was given. It was custom made for a particular group. It was actually custom made for a special forces group in the Middle East, and I was given one. So this is very thick ring, which is not designed like a karambit, but it's meant for a guy with using tactical gloves. It's meant to be it's meant to be deployed with your firearm, right? And I mean, this is a nasty piece of work. And yeah, so just everyone knows, but Philip does say not everyone is willing to use the weapon. Not everyone has the heart, but yeah. So, but would you recommend people get training and learn to use close range weapons?
Absolutely, definitely. I mean, if you can't do a lot of training, then get a shotgun. Because shotguns are forgiving. They're not long range, but at least up close, you don't have to because the first thing that's going to happen when you get an adrenaline dump, if something's going down and someone's threatening your life or your family's life, is your motor functions drop a little bit, your vision tunnels a little bit, and you lose a little bit of the cognition you have in that moment. So a shotgun is a good fallback to where, hey, I can point and spray and hopefully get the bad guy in front of me without if you're not one of those people that has the time and ability to go train a lot. And when I say train a lot with firearms, I mean you need to be putting thousands of rounds through them, especially pistols, just to get to a point where if you were in a high stress environment or high stress situation, you would be in control. So that, absolutely, as much training as you could do would be ideal. But in lieu of that, pick weapons that have big spreads on them so that you can hit things without.
No, I agree. Yeah, no, thank you for that advice. Yeah, look, I mean, let's just say my job involved me dealing with issues. I wasn't able to run from danger. My job was to confront it. So I've had to deal with things, and it's not always pleasant, let's say, but I'm here to talk about it. I mean, you obviously at a different level completely, but yeah, I mean, this has been really educational, very useful, I think, for everyone. And I learned a lot. But I think we should wind down here. This has been really, really great. Before it goes on too long, any last words you'd like to say, any thoughts you'd like to share? And everyone, please do follow him on X. It's linked in the pinned comment, so you can find him there and follow him on X. Any sort of last thoughts you'd like to share with us before we sign off?
No, just question everything. That's I put it on the end of a lot of my threads that I do, and a lot just don't even if it's something I put out there, don't take it as 100%. Go question it and look into it and kind of make your own analysis on it. Because at the end of the day, we need more critical thinkers in this world. So I'll leave it at that.
Yeah. No, cool. Thank you very much. So, one last thing. You are a Christian, right?
Yes.
My last question maybe, how does that influence you and how does that guide you in terms of what you do? And how do you balance being lethal, being willing to defend your family, your country, and to dealing with enemies, with your faith? How do you balance those?
I think it's, again, I'm not ever going to go do something wrong to somebody. I'm not going to go hurt somebody who's just, never had no threat to me. But I also, we call it the sheepdog mentality in our industry is, if a wolf is trying to come attack your herd, you're the sheepdog's there to protect them and fight them off. And the sheepdog's just as big and bad as that wolf is, but they're the ones that are also going to go and lay down next to those sheep and tend to them. So just kind of that mentality, like, hey, I will always protect, what's right. And then my family and loved ones. And I'll sleep at night knowing that, any actions taken to do that were righteous.
No, agreed. I did that course. Can't remember the name now, but I actually did that course that was offered. What's the name of the author? I read his book. I bought his books. I read them, and I did the course as well. But yeah, that's a very good analogy. Being the sheepdog, not the wolf. You're as dangerous as the wolf, but you're not a wolf. And you're not a. So yeah, I mean, I've looked danger in the face, and it wasn't a good time. But here I am. And the people I was looking after, they're okay. I'm okay. Everyone's okay. So
yeah.
So we leave it at that. But thank you very much. I mean, really fascinating. Much appreciated. So thank you to the audience, everyone. So thanks all for being here. Hopefully you learned something valuable. I'd love to have this conversation again in the future. Perhaps we can have another topic at some point. But thank you. And I'll sign off here. And everyone, thank you and God bless.
Awesome. Thanks. Have a good one, Lloyd. Appreciate it.
Thank you.